Hi guys, I'm the Impaired Grappler and welcome to my podcast. Today we have a very special episode that I shot in Brazil while there for the Pedro Sauer Jiu-Jitsu camp. And I interviewed two guys after receiving their black belts from the professor in Brazil, Adam, Deane and Brent Lillard from Virginia in America. We talk about learning from the professor from white belt to now black belts, what got them into Jiu-Jitsu and starting their business together and how Jiu-Jitsu has helped their company. We also touch on the experience of testing in paradise pretty much for their black belts in Brazil. We get into their history of injuries and also finding order in times of chaos. So it's a pretty cool conversation. I hope you guys enjoy and we'll catch you later. Us. Hi guys, I'm the Impaired Grappler and welcome to my podcast. Today we have two very special guests, the two latest black belts after Kyle in the Pedro Sauer Association. So welcome guys, we have Adam, Deane and Brent Lillard.
Lillard? Yep.
Lillard.
Yeah,
Sorry.
thanks.
No worries. So you guys are from
Virginia.
From Virginia, so you've been training under Pedro since the start.
Since about 2006. That's when he came down there, I believe. Moved down around 2006. So we were at One Spirit Martial Arts. It was Dave Anderson's gym, and Ben Douglas was our main instructor. We had at first before Pedro came down. So.
We had a real case of dumb luck because a month after we started training, they said, we were already amazed at this purple belt Ben Douglas and couldn't believe how good he was, and then they said, we're going to be getting someone who's even better to come teach, and we couldn't imagine that, and that someone better was Pedro Sauer, who's moving there. We helped him move into his house, and not even realizing really who he was at the time, and got indoctrinated.
Yeah, so like you just feel spoiled when you get introduced to him at a early level, like from white belt level. It's like, the knowledge and the concepts are just transferable to life and everything. So like, it's just amazing. So what brought you guys both into Jiu-Jitsu to start with?
So, from my perspective, I met Adam back in college, and he was actually a lifelong martial artist. So he was really into like the stand-up martial arts, and he'd wrestled and done all this stuff. And so I was really interested in that. He would teach me a couple of things, and just how to stand-up box and basic stuff. So I got really just into it in my head, and then took a class at George Mason under Ben and Chris Kim. And actually, Dave Anderson was the official instructor, but there was all Pedro Sauer affiliates, and I took that for I guess the year or 6 months or whatever, and brought back and showed a couple of techniques to Adam, and he and I were living together at the time, and Adam was like, "Wow, this stuff's really effective. Like this actually might be worth learning."
Absolutely.
And when he told me that, I was like, "Oh my God! Like Adam's been doing martial arts his whole life, and he thinks this stuff is good. So maybe this is like it's not just in my head, because I was naive to martial arts at the time." I was brand new to it all, and so we joined the gym together. We actually saw the UFC fight, Hoist Gracie and Matt Hughes,
UFC 60,
and we were, we had already like looked up about the original Hoist and all this stuff, and like we're just learning about the Gracies and all that, and we joined the gym, and under Ben Douglas, and Little Ben they called him, and he just beat us all over the mat. It was amazing, just with finesse and with a smile, but always like we could never just couldn't imagine how effective the techniques were. And then after a while, we were bringing all of our friends there, and just like got totally obsessed with it.
Totally.
So and from your perspective?
Yeah, from my perspective, I like he said, I was a lifelong martial artist, and I was doing the Taekwondo thing as a kid, the Kempo Karate and Hapkido, of course, but it was the state of martial arts in America in the early 90s wasn't so great. So a lot of, I found out like my first martial arts instructor was illegitimate. He just wanted to have a karate school, so he gave himself a black belt. And, but of course there's always benefits in being a kid, having martial arts and stuff. But the problem is that I grew up thinking that I was a tough guy and that I could kick people's ass. And, when I went to jiu-jitsu, I found out that everything I thought I wasn't. And then I just desperately wanted to fill that void. My ego was broken.
Yeah, that's a pretty common story. I think that one was lifelong martial artists. But
we bring bigger people in too, so it's like because we're not all that big, like I'm pretty skinny and he's kind of short, but like we'd bring big monsters in there that we were just couldn't believe like what was happening to him, and we would just see it over and over so consistently. It was like, my God, it made you a believer, immediately. You can't experience it without believing in it if you truly do experience it.
Yeah, cool. So tell us, like, you guys all started a business together with a few other friends that are here as well, and I guess home as well. But
so being we were in the Northern Virginia area when Brent and I met, which is right outside of Washington D.C. So a lot of the economy there revolves around the federal government, United States federal government. So naturally, there's a lot of federal type jobs, either working for the government or selling to the government or selling to somebody who sells to the government.
Yeah.
And Brent got into the industry, into an IT company that was a small business that was selling to the government. And him and I always, from the time we became friends, we always saw eye to eye on a lot of things, and we always kind of held each other. We were sure that one day we were going to be running a $100 million company. We were sure that we were going to do it. Didn't know exactly how, but we knew that it was going to happen. And we were always looking out to better ourselves and to find the next best opportunity that we could, with hard work. And what ended up happening is that Brent was working at this company called Pan America, and he had some guys there that were in their early 20s. And they were making a lot of money, a lot of money. And we were just blown away by how much money they were making. And Brent was telling me, you got to get in this industry, And so I ended up finding my way into a Fortune 500 version of what he was doing.
Right.
And started learning the big business side of things. So did some of our other friends that are here today, like Glenn and Hamza. And we were working at a company called CDW together. And we... when the timing was right, we joined forces.
Yeah. So Hamza and I came down and started GovSmart in 2010, and just you grew it. Once we all linked up, we knew that one day we would all link up. It's just a matter of we had to go down and get the infrastructure set up, and we were actually working with them. Our first big deal came from Adam, coming, basically like working with us, as a small business, because we would be like the prime contractor and then he'd be the subcontractor. So we figured out a lot of creative ways to get the company going. And then once it was up and running and the four of us were together, it was just like clockwork. I mean, it was amazing. Every meeting we had, and we attribute a lot of the success to the jiu-jitsu, because by the time we started, GovSmart, we were already full on into jiu-jitsu. We had a policy for everyone at GovSmart to be able to train, and it just, it really, it grew extremely fast. So we were
Brazilian ant.
Oh yeah, nice. So we were, we've gotten a bunch of recognition at the company. We were in 2014, we were the fastest growing computer hardware company in the United States. And then in 2015, we were top 20 most promising companies in Forbes magazine. So we've, we did 122.5 million in sales this year, and we've got 45 employees. So we've been really, it's been awesome. But we really take a lot of the jiu-jitsu philosophy that we've learned from Pedro Sauer and really applied it to business. It's been really, really good.
And not only that, we also pick off a lot of employees off the jiu-jitsu mats. So we've had several employees that weren't in our industry to begin with, and but we saw, in my opinion, jiu-jitsu is a reflection of life in a lot of ways, and it kind of covers all the aspects of it, all the ranges of emotions that are in there, and you can kind of see a lot of things in people that will apply to other areas of their life as well. Typically the guy who's laughing and smiling when he's getting his ass kicked on the mat is probably going to deal okay when he gets some bad news at work.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that's pretty interesting. Like, you guys, you were in college, like a bunch of friends, and you knew you wanted to start something together, but you all went your separate ways.
Yeah.
Learned what each of you needed to learn to bring back into the business and
we
work together.
We knew we wanted to do it, we just didn't have a plan yet. So we ended up having to go our different ways to find out what worked, and then we took the best of both worlds.
Okay.
So we took all the small business advantages that you have by being a small business selling to the government, and we took a lot of the things that the big businesses were doing that were working really well. It gave us a unique perspective. So we ended up being a blend where we had all the advantages of both.
Incorporating jiu-jitsu, just
And that was really where we stood apart. You know, like when we go to meetings, everyone wanted to hear about where you got that scratch on your face. Then we'd start talking about, this or that, and it's, just being here in Brazil right now, we had last night, we had a big meeting going on back home. There was a big bar event with Dell, and we had people out there, and they FaceTimed with us. Here we are in Brazil, getting ready to test for our black belts. It's a really neat story. People are very interested in that type of thing, and it's, but the main thing is that the bonding that you get as a group, like what Adam and I have experienced together, going through this whole thing, you can't explain it. It's not something that you can just tell people, like, this is really great. It's just like you have to experience it to even understand, like, how great something can be. It's like, it makes you almost cry, thinking about it. It's been really, really huge in my life. I went from being, like, really timid. I was literally afraid to poop at school. Terrified of things like that, like had a lot of anxiety, really weird things like that, and then jiu-jitsu just literally smashed all that out of me. It didn't, you don't have the option really to be like that after a while. It just kind of desensitizes you. So I owe a lot to jiu-jitsu.
Like all of us do.
And one time I heard Kurt Osiander put it, that time we went and did a private with him. He was talking about how jiu-jitsu affects people, and he said, he's like, how like, jiu-jitsu kind of starts, the white belts come in, and as they near their blue belt, it's kind of beating the lame out of them. It's really true.
And Pedro calls it the one percenters. Another advantage is that, the people that don't have that type of personality, they can handle, having their ego shattered and then, like, pick themselves back up and learn and, like, decide, okay, well, I'm just going to get better at this. It's really hard for some people. So you end up with, what's left, the core group, they're all vetted, and it's amazing. It's like you see more, like, the smartest, like, nicest, like, most capable badasses that you could ever imagine. Like, it's not normal. It's not what I ever would have thought martial arts would be. And a lot of that, we contribute to, Pedro Sauer and his environment that he's created, his philosophies, his personality.
His example.
He sets a hell of an example, and he's probably up there right now, stacking rocks at the waterfall, because he's just, it's really, really amazing, to watch him, and it's just been an awesome role model.
Yeah, well, we were here 5 years ago, I think, 2013, and, like, so much has changed. And, like, you guys have come, this is your fifth time?
This is our fifth trip here.
So, like, tell us about the experience of, all the times you've come, but, like, this time around, you tested for your black belt today. Like, what was it like? Like, last night you were, like, couldn't sleep and stuff. So, sort of tell us about what was going through your head, like both of you, and then like then today actually like what you actually remember, everything, and then like how it's all been, and then like we're sitting in front of the famous Helio Gracie. Is that the Passat? Is that his
car?
That's his
car.
Pedro
Sauer had it restored.
Pedro Sauer's had it fully restored. We had it parked by the pool, and we took photos with your brand new black belt. So
that's true.
It's pretty cool. So I'll leave it to you.
So, last night for me was interesting. Actually, when I was taking a shower before I went to bed, yesterday was when Pedro officially told us we were going to test, and it was, it was pretty just emotional even just to hear that in the beginning, because it's this goal that I set from the time it started. I mean, everyone wants to, when they start, if they get into jiu-jitsu, you want to be a black belt, not because you just want to be a black belt, but you want to possess those abilities, that deserve it.
It's such a far off goal.
And it's so distant, when you first begin, and it's something I've been talking about, like when I started off as a white belt, this black belt's this untouchable person that's just, it's a superhuman, and you get your blue belt. Black belt's so distant, and then you get your
far away at blue belt levels.
And you get your purple belt, and you're like, oh, I'm just at the halfway mark. I still have so much more time, And then all of a sudden you get your brown belt, and the day you get your brown belt, you're like, oh my gosh, next is black belt.
Yeah.
If I don't start fixing what I think needs to be fixed right now, every day is a day wasted, So definitely felt that pressure, over the last 2 years. I've been a brown belt now for 2 years. I was a brown belt for 2 years, and so when I was in the shower, I started to get overwhelmed with emotion. Definitely started to tear up, and it was just a big moment for me just to imagine today. And so last night I would sleep for 2 hours, wake up, and I'd wake up and I'd review the self-defense exam. I'd watch a video of someone else's test, and go back to sleep and dreaming about moves. And I was definitely up extra early this morning.
It's a little different, because all of our experience, our muscle memory has been, a lot of ground, work and stuff. But fortunately, getting in under Pedro Sauer early, he kind of taught us that self-defense was what it was all about. So all of our training has been revolved around making sure that it works in a self-defense environment. So we've learned a lot of good techniques. But for me, the challenge of the black belt test was that there's these 76 or whatever moves that are all things that I don't do on a day-to-day basis in my grappling. In my type of learning, I can't just look at something and just spit it back out. It's really, really hard for me. So my brain struggles with it. So it was a challenge. And now, now that we've gotten our black belts, it's like we literally start over, because now everyone looks at every single move. If you teach somebody an armbar, you have to teach it perfectly, or you shouldn't be teaching it. And so it's like, we have to basically reevaluate our entire game now and realize, really what holes we have, because we're not allowed to have holes anymore, or not allowed to have holes that we're not working on. We have to be aware of our holes, and we can't be naive to the fact that, just because we're black belts, we're still the same white belts that we started, as far as like how much more there is to learn. It's just that we've learned so much in the meantime, but there's so much more.
So would you say the underlying message is beware of your holes?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So immature. I don't know. That might get this off YouTube.
I'm sorry.
That's so outrageous, bro. That's awesome. So this being the Impaired Grappler podcast, I'd love to know what injuries you guys have had, and like your experience with it, and especially like just something that like people from watching, listening to this some kind of concept or message they can take, or something you guys do to prevent, or when you've got injuries, or
Yeah, that's a great.
what you've learned.
My list will be a little bit shorter, I think.
Yeah.
I've been one of the few people who have never had a significant jiu-jitsu injury. I've never had an injury from jiu-jitsu that made me miss a day of jiu-jitsu. I've now, that being said, I've also never had a day that I've been doing jiu-jitsu where my body felt great in that way. I mean, in terms of I'm always tweaked. My hand hurts or finger this or that, but it's never something that keeps me
off the mat.
Now, I did one time while I was out here in Brazil. I was playing soccer, football, and playing in the rain, and I slipped and tore my MCL. But even then, after I tore my MCL, I still showed up at jiu-jitsu every day, and I had to lay there with my leg flat like this, and everybody passed my guard to this side, and I became an expert or a specialist at reversing side control.
Well, that's the thing. You don't need all your limbs to. That's what I do. You don't need all your limbs to be able to stay on the mat. So
you've proven that.
It's amazing.
I was completely blown away rolling with you today. That was more than eye-opening.
Now, from my perspective, I've been hurt a lot. So I started out. Now, every one of them I can honestly say was a result of either ego or not doing what I was told, or doing what I was told not to do, something along those lines. It was always, looking back, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of those injuries anymore because I've realized what not to do. But I started with I was rolling at Charlottesville Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is where we spend most of our time actually rolling. And I had a guy, real big, badass dude, who's on top of me and mount, and I put my legs in front of him like this, across my legs, and I used to can opener people that way, and it would work. I tapped a lot of people with it for a little while, and I was warned by a professor not to do it, but I was like, oh, I've got Gumby knees, I'm a special case, so I did this thing, and I'm pulling on him one day, and I made the mistake of when my leg was bent, I pushed it out with my own leg, and it just goes pop. And I was like, oh no! And I like got him off of me, and I'm laying there, and it was just horrible. It was horrible, horrible pain, and it was a level 3 LCL tear, and that was the beginning of my knee problems. So that was a nightmare. That took about probably 5 months before I could get back on the mat, and then when I got back on the mat, it was like lay on my back and get past, pretty much, like he's saying. You pretty much have to be very, very laid back with it. And then I had, after my LCL was torn, over time my meniscus on my right knee started to be a real problem, and it was locking me up. I was here at a Brazil camp with Helson Gracie one time in Pedro, and it locked up on me, and it was stuck for like an hour, and it took forever, and we finally figured out how to get it out and stuff. But that ended up needing surgery, so I got surgery on my right meniscus, had most of it taken out. They told me I could either repair the meniscus and be able to walk, long term, or I could not repair the meniscus, take it all out, and continue doing jiu-jitsu. Because if I repaired the meniscus, they said I couldn't do jiu-jitsu anymore, which I don't believe now looking back at it. But I opted for jiu-jitsu, so I had them take it out completely. So now it's pretty much bone on bone. Hasn't been a problem yet. But one day, like, it might become an issue. I might have to get some stem cell stuff. But aside from that, I had a nose deviated septum surgery, actually, separate. It wasn't something caused in jiu-jitsu, but I figured out I could wear a head mask, like it was like a football thing, and so I kept training, with that after the first little while when I was able to. I've had lots of hand injuries where I've had to train with. Just like fingers getting really hurt and stuff. Had to train with tennis balls or just like cut out the grips. All kinds of stuff, neck, back. But all of the injuries that I've gotten for the most part come from trying too hard against a resisting opponent, like when you lost that position. So if you grab the gi and they yank your arm off, you got to let it go. Like, you can't, somebody that's twice your size, he's yanking on your hand. You can fight it if you want, but your hands are going to suffer.
Yeah, your grip,
and you can, your
grips can get stronger than your fingers can withstand.
Exactly. And you can get really good at triangles, and you put someone in a wicked triangle and they stack you, and you don't want to give it up, or you don't want to, like, make the frame that might make you lose the triangle, but it protects your back. That's a mistake, because all of us are going to get old and pitiful, and, there's not going to be any way to train. You can't be like Professor and have that technique and without doing it for a really long time. And if you're going to do it a really long time, you better protect yourself. And he showed us by example after all his surgeries, because he came from the old school, back in the day when they just literally just beat the crap out of each other, and we're fortunate that we didn't have to have
themselves.
Right, we're an in-between, where we've trained hard, trained rough, but we weren't MMA like brutally brawling against all types of people. So it's different. But I do think there's something to be said for learning technique through the live application of it. But I think that it's way better to learn the technique, what not to do, and then like start to get into the harder training. Because if you don't, you end up making some serious mistakes
and building bad habits,
damage your body.
It's hard on the ego to just not to listen to everything and no, I'm different, but then you might pull something. It's like, I shouldn't have done that, but so look, I've just one final question. I asked Cole this as well, but in terms of order and chaos, like jiu-jitsu, we're always under pressure, and then like try to find peace in the chaos and whatever. So like, how have you got an example of when you found order in terms of chaos in your life, whether in your childhood or adulthood, that you could impart on us all?
Sure. I got one good one from Hawaii. So when I was in Hawaii with these guys, it was actually right before we started the Brazil trip tradition, and me and Sean decided one day it was double overhead craziness, and we went out. We were in North Shore, Oahu in November, and it was really crazy waves out there, and I didn't think much of it because I thought I was this invincible swimmer at the time. I'd never had anything scared me in the water. I could hold my breath for so long. And so we went on out there, and I had a horrible, almost drowning experience. I went out way too far, got tired, got caught into some shit, and it was bad. And it was literally a life or death struggle. I remember being limp in the water at one point, like, this is it, like, game over. My friends back on the beach, like, here I'm dying all alone. Like, I literally had these thoughts. And something about this was after jiu-jitsu though, and I know that without jiu-jitsu, I wouldn't have been able to be calm in that moment, because you have so many times where someone's suffocating the crap out of you, and you can't breathe, and you're panicking, and all of a sudden you realize, it's all in my head. Just gotta calm down. Just gotta work on my breath. And like, that was the moment I had where it was just like, I have one chance to get out of this, and I ended up getting out of it. It felt like a miracle. It was just a really traumatizing experience. I was literally kissing the sand when I got back. It was closer to death than I ever think that I could have come. If anything went wrong, anything, anything.
Or worse.
It was so much could have happened in that situation. But I remember how important it was for me to be able to find that, that tranquility when you're in the middle of hell. You're in the middle of chaos. You have to be able to like silence it for a second so you can think clearly.
Yeah, that's kind of like how they used to, like John the Baptist used to baptize people by drowning them until they have that like epiphany, and that's kind of like the metaphysical kind of, when you have that experience.
Right.
Allegedly, I don't know, but like that's like what I heard.
Coming out in the death.
Yeah, it's like something like that. Your brain's like and then you let go, and that's like you're born anew, And like, did you feel like you actually, and you got born
100%.
new? Yeah,
Totally
so
different person.
Like,
It changed me.
yeah,
It definitely changed him.
yeah.
It just did.
The rest of our trip got a lot safer.
My life got a little bit safer, honestly. I stopped taking quite as many, that type of risk felt really normal. And then, like, once you realize that, okay, I don't have the judgment to decide what's safe and what's
And the
not.
older you get, the less you're able to actually do what you could do like 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Right.
You know?
The older we get, the more stuff we used to be good at.
The 20-year-old me would have just, I've jumped out of planes, I did all sorts of stuff, but, skiing all the time. I couldn't go skiing now with my knees.
Yeah.
If I fell on my arm, I'd be screwed, But, and like,
Crazy.
did you have anything
So,
to answer that?
like, the question basically being...
finding order in times of chaos, just outside of, like, being under mount or being squashed
Like
on jiu-jitsu, sort of in your life, whether as a kid or just...
Yeah, I've always been pretty happy-go-lucky for the most part, and I did have an incident happen where so I was really athletic back in high school, and I always prided myself in playing various sports, from football to wrestling and lifting weights and such. And when I was 17, I had a real bad headache one day, and it was terrible, and it didn't go away for 2 weeks, and I went to the hospital to get it looked at, and long story short, they told me I was missing a fifth of my brain. And they came in and said, which was pretty shocking, because they come in and they slap a CAT scan, and they're like, this is your brain. And this giant lime-sized, lemon-sized thing is a cyst that we don't know what it is. And we're going to have to take you by an ambulance. We're going to have to take you by an ambulance to a different hospital. And so, my parents are freaking out. And I remember having this feeling where I was like, so they put me on the stretcher to wheel me out to the ambulance. And it was one of the most significant moments of my whole life. I was like, I wonder how much better it's going to be, or how much longer it's going to be till I wake back up in my bed and everything's normal again. Because right now it's a little bit crazy, but I'm sure, like, because I remember when I was a teenager and I broke my hand, and I was so devastated because I couldn't play basketball for 6 weeks. But then before I knew it, I was playing basketball again, and it was just, the time came, and so in that moment when things were a little bit crazy and a little bit scary, I felt my brain shift to that thought, and I remember I was so dedicated on the thought, and so they found out so what I have isn't killing me. It's called an arachnoid cyst, and it's relatively asymptomatic. And but I woke up the next day, and because of all the painkillers and drugs they had me on, I was like, I wonder if I'm gonna be better today. And I just remember getting sick. And okay, it's not today, and it took 2 months until my headache went away. So I definitely, in that moment, though, I definitely found a lot of peace and some chaos.
Yeah. Well, you probably found your whole life was in chaos and you didn't even know it.
You're right.
So you said you were like, they reckon you were born with it.
Yeah. So apparently I had a stroke before I was born.
You grew up like that. So it's like, it says a lot about the neuroplasticity of the brain, and I'm sure like you play chess all the time, so it's not like it's had an impact on your life at all. So it's
but it's been a great
amazing.
excuse.
Yeah. I have to keep playing chess. I have to keep training my brain. I have to keep doing it. But yeah. All right. No worries. Thanks for being so open and honest.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your.
It's a great day.
It's been a great trip. It's been an awesome day. It was actually really good. But yeah. All right. Thanks a lot for that. And
thanks.
We'll see you guys.
Thank you.
You guys are heading off tonight, so we'll see you guys hopefully in America.
Hopefully back next year, and we'll see you guys in Australia.
Yeah,
we're definitely coming
for sure.
Yeah, you'll be surprised. We'll be there faster than you think.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. We'll be happy to have you guys.
Awesome.
But anyway, all right, thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers. Impaired out.
All right. Thanks, man.
Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed that podcast. It was a pretty cool conversation with Adam and Brent. So I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to check out the links below for their links, as well as my social media links. Be sure to follow, like, subscribe and share and all that jazz, and we'll catch you next time. Us.